What's up guys, Patrick from wpbuilderhelper, and in today's video we are going to finally end the debate. The debate that everyone's been having, everyone's been talking about, but no one has done a video on, no one has any data for. So now it's time to get into the trenches and do it. I am taking a shared hosting website and I am going to literally put every single page builder that I can find on there, and I'm going to load it up, and I am going to look at the differences between Gutenberg blocks and page builders. How much is it really slowing down your website? How do we know? I'm going to take and I'm going to throw some basic blocks on a page, and I'm going to see for sure once and for all which page builder is truly the fastest when you put it on a shared hosting site with no other plugins, just that page builder, and maybe some other plugins, security plugins thrown in just for good measure. We're going to test it against a base, and then we're going to go through and we're going to determine which one is literally ranking the worst just from looking at the times of the page loads. I'm going to do exactly what you told me to do. I'm going to take 3 results from each of the page builders. So I'm going to load the page 3 times on GTmetrix and Google Page Speed Insights, and then we're going to determine which one's the winner. So let's get started. What's up guys? So here's a small disclaimer with this test before we get things started, before we start jumping in. So one of the things I wanted to note is that I am not a speed up professional. There are plenty of sites out there that can speed up your website and do things like that. So I wanted to mention that I'm not a professional. This test is as scientific as I could be, with keeping everything very balanced and very fair on the same playing level. With that said, you're going to notice that some page builders aren't on the list. That's not on purpose. Some Gutenberg builders are not on the list. That's not on purpose either. I grabbed as many of them as I could. There's 11 total that I added. I think that most of the ones I got are some of the more popular ones. Some of them I didn't have licenses for, so I couldn't test them. Some of them there were other issues that ended up happening while I was trying to test them. So there were big different reasons why they don't show up on the list. If I had licenses to everything, I would make this the most comprehensive list I could, but that would cost me thousands upon thousands of dollars. So please just understand that while I have most things, and while I'm able to test a good majority of the total builders that are out there, and even some of the more popular Gutenberg blocks, I couldn't just test everything. There's way too much. I mean, if you go into every nook and cranny, you'll start seeing the patterns just from the ones I do test, and hopefully it gives you a good idea of what's going to happen in the future, and I also have some recommendations at the very end. So please, if you're interested in any of this, stay till the very end where I give you my final feedback and everything, and also tell you what you can do to kind of reduce these times and everything like that. But with that said, we're going to take and we're going to dive into this. So I'm going to start you off with just the basics of how I tested. Then we're going to get into the feedback of the test itself and go over some things that I found out that I thought was very interesting in the testing, and just some things that I noticed that were patterns that didn't show up in some things but showed up in others, which I also thought was interesting. So we're going to talk about that also. So I'm going to start showing that in a second, so when we get started, just look out for that. But please, once again, I'm not a professional, so this is just my own test that I did, and it's my own opinion, so take it as such. Hopefully this helps you out in the future. I wanted to take and show you exactly what I was doing and how I was doing this testing. So what I'm doing to basically grade all of these different builders and all these different Gutenberg builders is to take and create a page, specifically the home page itself, so it's going to be the basis of everything. And I'm going in and I'm adding, one row that is a basically a header icon or a text icon. Sorry about the dog in the back if you can hear it. And I basically turn this into a header. So I'll use something like, it really doesn't matter. This is a title, and we make sure to, give it that, make sure to give it like instead of a paragraph, we set it for a heading. Not that, once again, not that that's really the, the end all be all. That doesn't really do anything. And then from here, what we do is I'm going to continue to add stuff to it. So I'm going to add in an image, and then that image I already have uploaded. This is an image that I used. It's 750 by 500 pixels. It was originally 674 KB, and then I used tiny PNG to reduce it down to 164 KB. So it's been reduced. That's why I'm using this picture, because it's already been optimized. So I didn't want to use an unoptimized picture because I thought that would make the test unfair, and I didn't want to do that. And also, just for giggles, I add in a button just to kind of show in a button. It doesn't, nothing special. I don't customize it. I don't do anything like that. And this is the basic page that I'm using. And then after I'm done this, basically what I'll do is I'll save this page. So it's saved, and then I'll go to the website itself, which this is the test website that I'm using, just the domain name that I had. And I'll run the Speed Insights on it. And I'll run it twice, and after I run it, I'm going to take and go into the place where I'm actually adding the data. So if you look here, we've got a whole entire page where I add the data, and I take this specific data, and what I go in and do is I add it into this spreadsheet that I'm building. By the way, this is going to be on my website all in nice and pretty view, so if you want it, you can look at it there. But I'll be going over it in the video that you're watching right now, going over the data. So important thing to note about this data is the first section of this data will be the 3 tests that I ran using the Google Page Speed Insights. The second test will be GT Matrix. And as you can see, you've got the ratings for everything, load time, and it's got split things. So that's why I didn't want people to get confused. Because GT doesn't score the same way that Google Page Speed Insights does. So I wanted to make sure that it allowed you to see the difference between these. In some cases, they're very similar to one another. They don't look too different. But in some cases, you get some data that's pretty out there. And we're going to talk about all that later on. So I wanted you to know this going into it. And honestly, I should have, when I did the test originally, I should have done it with largest content paint. But I didn't. I did first content paint for the Google Page Speed Insights. So as you can see, this kind of varies in some cases. So you got to take that with a grain of salt. I did first content paint rather than largest content paint. Since I was doing that, I really should go back and rerun the test, but I'm not going to rerun the test because this uses large content paint. You just know that it's first content paint rather than largest content paint. So that does make a little bit of difference on the test. However, I still think that the data is worth it because when we're looking through it, you can kind of see on here that the data is it's shifted a good bit. So you can kind of see what the differences is between them. And we're going to be going over all this. But I just wanted you to know how I was doing the testing. Hopefully this helps you out. I'm not saying that I am an expert in testing whatsoever. This is what the general consensus from some of my last testing was and what they recommended. And that's what I'm doing. I've taken almost everything out of this. But for right now, we're going to get back to the video and we're going to start talking, like really deep diving into the theory. Okay, so when this comes out, I will have this this blog post that's posted for your enjoyment. It kind of goes over a lot of what I've already gone over in the video, but it gives you some ideas of some things that I did in the background, just talking about how I tested these and how I came up with them and everything like that. And when you get to this area, you're going to see that these are the scores that everybody got. Now, so just so we understand and just so everything is on the level with everything, Cadence was the base for this score. Like, I just used the Cadence theme with plain Gutenberg by itself with nothing in it as a base just to determine what the base of this was. Meaning, I wanted to see how it differed from thing to thing. So in the score rating, as I mentioned, the first score is page speed insights. So when you go to there, obviously desktop is desktop, so the score for desktop is this, the score for mobile is this. And then I did first content paint, which I know is wrong. I should have done largest content paint. I should have done that. I really should have, but I didn't. I did first content paint. Just because, technically speaking, I could have copied all of this, and I could have gotten all this data, and it would have taken a lot longer. It took me just about 4 or 5 hours to do all of this. It was an extremely time-intense operation to get all these tests done with different builders and everything. Downloading the builders, and then installing the builders, and then creating the page for the builders and all of that. But for GT, the first score is right here. So if we're looking, I'm going to bring this up. So first score is here. The second is the load time, which is right there. That's the largest content paint. So technically, I did mark it on here as LCP. And then the third score is the second rating that they give you, which is right here, the structure. And then the fourth score is the blocking time. So, I mean, most of that, the blocking was basically, they really, everybody was almost 0 for this and almost 0 for this. There were a couple page builders that weren't. But the whole point of this score was to take and give you the base, so the base of cadence, and then go through and start going through page builder by page builder and starting to get the scores. Here's what I discovered just by doing this. So page builders have a pretty consistent speed with one another. There were 3 that in total that ranked higher than others, and that was Oxygen, Beaver Builder, and Live Canvas. No surprise. As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think Oxygen was ranking really, really well. I don't remember if Live Canvas ranked better on mobile. It did. So that's another thing that was interesting. So I started learning things doing this test. One is that page builders' mobile scores are terrible. Almost every single page builder had a really bad mobile score, with the exception, once again, of Beaver Builder, Live Canvas, and Oxygen, who I think Oxygen wasn't great. It was good, but it wasn't great. The mobile score was much better with Beaver Builder. I mean, I guess it's only 1 second. It's 1 millisecond slower, so it was okay. But Live Canvas really did well on this test. It stayed kind of true to the original score. As a matter of fact, if you were looking at the loading time of this, Live Canvas was actually faster loading-wise than even the Cadence base, which I don't understand how that happened, but apparently Live Canvas is just faster. Apparently the way that it sets things up is faster. So I was very interested in that. Most page builders, that's where they suffered the most, is the mobile loading time. The mobile loading time was not good in most page builders. Specifically, the slowest being Thrive didn't do very good. Brizzy kind of wavered a lot. It went from kind of being all right to kind of the slower. But in a second, I'm going to talk about that too. So don't panic just yet. I'm not crapping on all of these Brizzy people, but it was one of the slower page builders that were there. Of course, Elementor was also very slow. Elementor was the slowest desktop page builder, which I found quite interesting. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect Elementor to be that slow. It was very confusing. It pulled scores of 1.5 seconds for just a text, a header, an image, and a button. That's all that was on the page, and it was pulling 1.5 seconds. I mean, granted, I get it. Thrive was pulling 1.2, and Brizzy's pulling 1.1. Oxygen was pulling an 8 second. Most people, like Cadence, was about 8 seconds, 7 seconds, 6 seconds, depending. But most of the builders were pulling under a second if they were trying to load. And for some reason, Elementor even pulled higher load time than Divi, which it just shocked me. I did not expect Elementor to pull higher load time than Divi. That was a complete, that came out of everywhere. Although Divi's mobile was also very bad. Another thing that I learned with this was that the blocks in general are much faster, but something to mention, there's two things to mention before I go to that. Number one, I was surprised by Oxygen, because Oxygen turns off cadence. So it had one leg up on almost every other page builder on the market because it turned off the theme. So it didn't have to load any of that. But at the same time, Oxygen did not pull the numbers that I thought it should have pulled. So keep in mind something when we're doing this too. The score that is here and the score that is here are vanity metrics, meaning that they really don't mean anything. A percentage does not give you any kind of, it doesn't help you in the real world. The score doesn't help you. It doesn't matter if you have a 97 or a 53 or, Brizzy scored a 50 right here. None of that matters. What really matters is your load times and your blocking, and some of these other things really matter a lot more than these stupid vanity metrics of 100% on GT metrics or Google PageSpeed Insights. I mean, none of that matters. It's really a pointless score. I don't even know why they do it. I hate the A, B, C type thing. It's just pointless. I hate the way they do that. So that whole entire thing kind of aggravated me. But I was really shocked at how slow Oxygen was. It was fast, don't get me wrong. But I was shocked at how slow it was when I compared it to other builders, such as Beaver Builder, such as Live Canvas, which pulled better scores in some cases than Oxygen. I didn't understand it. They were still using the theme, but yet Oxygen had turned off the theme and they still pulled better scores than Oxygen. And I know that Beaver Builder for a fact, but maybe Beaver Builder didn't. Beaver Builder was like a millisecond higher than Oxygen. But in some ways, I don't remember. Yeah, it pulled better mobile scores from Oxygen. So it's give one, give another. I was really interested in the whole Beaver Builder thing. I had seen on some of the forum posts that they said that Beaver Builder was well optimized from some of the people in the Oxygen group. And come to find out, that's absolutely true. Beaver Builder runs as light as Oxygen and as light as Live Canvas. Live Canvas was very impressive. Now, Live Canvas doesn't have a whole lot in it yet, so you can't go by that. But if you're a coding genius, kind of like someone coming from Oxygen or something like that, Live Canvas is definitely worth a look because they were pulling some good numbers. These numbers were not bad at all. I wish they had more to it right now, and they don't. I'm hoping in the future they do, but it pulled good numbers, so that was impressive. So anyway, back to cadence blocks and all of this. So cadence blocks for me was the baseline for the blocks because it really pulled the best numbers out of the blocks I tested. And I really should have tested more blocks, but I only went with 4. Those were the 4 I pulled. It wasn't by happenstance. Maybe in the future I'll do some more tests and I'll grab some more blocks and I'll do that and test them. But cadence blocks specifically pulled decent numbers. It was decent block numbers. I was impressed by the block numbers because it really didn't add a whole lot of bloat to it, and I was really happy with that. It added some loading time on the mobile end, but it didn't add a whole lot of time anywhere else. It was really, everything else was pretty standard. It had pretty good scores. The scores were consistent. That's another thing that I wanted to mention that came out of this test that surprised me. The page builder scores were very up and down. Brizzy had some up and down scores. I think Divi had some up and down scores. Even Elementor had some up and down scores. Particularly in this this blocking time, Divi and Brizzy both had blocking time on their builders when I ran the test. No other builders had it, which I thought was very interesting in the fact that they had it. I'm not sure why. It wasn't much. Brizzy had much more blocking time than Divi, but at the end of the day, it didn't matter. They were still in the green whenever you tested them, so it still worked and everything was still fine. So at the end of the day, I mean, I wouldn't put much on it. I don't think it was that big of a deal. I was shocked by Gitwid, which is one of the more the bigger block builders that's out there. I wouldn't say bigger. I guess it's more popular in some ways. It put scores similar to page builders, which I thought was interesting. It was pulling scores that looked like it had a full page builder suite in it. I don't know if that's just because of the blocks, but once again, all I loaded was a header and an image and a button. That's it. I didn't load anything else. So to see these scores and what it was scoring, I was shocked. They need to get that in line, because when you're comparing that to Cadence blocks, in all reality, the rest of these scored pretty close to each other. Quibbly was pretty good. Stackable, very good. All of the scores were, fairly close. They weren't bad. They were all Gutenberg block builder scores. And so that brings up another point. Page builders work a lot differently than blocks, okay? What you have to understand is most of these block builders integrate with Gutenberg. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, well, page builders do too. That's true. But unlike the Gutenberg blocks, they don't rely on it. Their builder is their whole entire function. There's nothing else to it. Their builder does everything in most cases. Brizy does not rely on Gutenberg for you to make a blog post. But if you were to use something like Cadence blocks or Quibbly or something like that, it would rely on some basic Gutenberg blocks because they don't have all the blocks. I think Cadence is the closest block manufacturer right now on the market. Maybe Stackable. Stackable has a lot of blocks too. So Stackable's pretty good. I'm not sure about Quibbly. I played with Quibbly a little bit. Like I said, I have a license for it, and I don't know. I'm going to have to give it another try at some point. But it just wasn't my favorite block builder. I like Cadence a whole lot more. I think Stackable's getting there. It's definitely coming out with a lot of stuff. It was a little bit more confusing than Cadence. But in general, so we get to our conclusion of this. And before I do any of that, we're gonna take and switch screens so that you're not looking at this. But just in case you want this is on the WP Builder Helper website. So go check that out. It'll give you all the details of everything that I tested, all the different scores, 3 tests for each builder. Well, technically 6 tests for each builder, but 3 tests per website. We did the Gutenberg, we did the GT Matrix, and the Page Builder Page Speed Insights. We did both of those tests and ran them, and then I gathered all the data and I put it on the website, and I just did a complete data dump just so you could see it and so you could get an idea. So let's sit down with the results. Like, we've already gone over the results of what this is and what this means, but now I want to talk about something else. All right? All right, so what does all this mean? Does this mean that you should take your page builder and you should start dumping it for Gutenberg blocks? Does it mean that you should automatically go with Cadence? Does it mean, what does all of this mean? What does this matter to you? In fact, the results probably show more or less that it matters very little. Number one, this was tested on shared hosting, one of the worst hosting providers. Well, I shouldn't say worst hosting providers because I like the host. The host is very good for being a shared host. But it's the slowest hosting that you could get. Anyone can tell you that if you go with any other type of hosting, cloud or VPS or anything like that, you're going to get better hosting in terms of that. You're going to get better speeds. You're going to get all of those. So it had the worst hosting you could get. It also was not using caching of any sort. It had very few plugins. It had like SSL Builder. I didn't even put a security on it when I was testing. I turned all that off. Just SSL and whatever the page builder was or block builder. And that was it. And so I think that this kind of shows you that even if you're using a page builder, you can... It depends on the goals of what you're doing with the website. That's all that matters. What are the goals? If you're someone who is worried about speed and all you're thinking about is the almighty Google and all you're thinking about is being the fastest and your page has to load in 0.5 seconds of a millisecond or whatever, You can do that with all of these page builders. You can do it with all the Gutenberg blocks. I think a lot of the caching and the really good hosts out there make up the difference in that to push these to the next level where you don't have to worry about that. I think that page builders in general, WordPress in general, and even Gutenberg blocks in general need some sort of caching plugin. They need some sort of optimizations to the images and all of that. All of that still has to happen in the background, still has to go through. So at the end of the day, you can kind of choose what you need. It all depends on what your project is and what your goal is. That's all that really matters at the end of the day. I was shocked by this because I expected the results to be much, much worse than what I got. And at times, yes, some of the results were bad mobile-wise, but the only thing that I could pull out of this is that most page builders, with the exception of the ones I listed that did really well mobile-wise, need to work more on the mobile side of things to get their page builder faster mobile-wise. They need to take and work on that so that they could take and improve those scores and rank higher on Google with that stuff. Other than that, everything looked fine. I mean, all the page builders kind of followed in line with one another. Yes, there was the fastest. Yes, there was the slowest. And you could look at all that data by going to the website. By the way, I'll have all the links down in the description below at the bottom, including my affiliate links. So if you buy anything, don't get mad at me. That's just my way of trying to make a buck, okay? That's just how it works. But the whole point of this being that I just wanted to show you what you could do. If you have a really good host, you have good caching, any of these are viable. Any of them. So don't jump ship just yet and say, oh, well, Cadence is faster than Elementor because of this, this, and this. Yes, that's true in some situations. I would prefer Cadence over Elementor in a situation where I am doing an affiliate website because it's lighter. If you're adding ads to it, that's going to bog that website down. So each instance of this can be different depending on what the person is doing with it. For a real estate website, you may not want Cadence blocks. You may want something more like, Oxygen or Live Canvas or anything like that, or even Beaver Builder that has more power to it so that you can do more with it. And that's one of the things I mentioned in the article. Until Gutenberg blocks reaches a point where they're closer to the page builder experience, that is mobile, that is pop-ups, that is headers and footers, that is all of that. Yes, I understand themes can do that, but when Gutenberg can do that natively, then you've got a different topic on your hand. Now, you're not comparing apples to oranges. You're comparing apples to apples because Gutenberg is on the level of page builders. And I just don't think right now it's there yet. Some of these really good builders, such as Stackable, Cadence, and others, are doing a really good job of making that distinction and saying, hey, we're close to page builders. Don't discount us. And so, at the end of the day, you have to take and decide, but I don't think any of these are bad choices. That's just my opinion. I think certain projects, you wouldn't choose certain types of page builders for those projects. But I think for other projects, you probably would because it wouldn't matter as much. So at the end of the day, you kind of have to decide what's right for you. I know that probably wasn't the answer you wanted, but it's still the answer I gave. And like I said, you can take the data and do with it what you want. So if you go and look at that data, make your own choice. I hope this has helped you, and I hope I've earned your subscribe today. I hope this data was great for you. Like I said, I spent about 5 or 6 hours on it, doing the testing and then formatting the data, writing the blog post, doing everything else just so I could give you the data and making the video so that you had it all so that we can finally end this goofy fight back and forth that I'm using the blocks because somebody says the blocks are better. No, go do the data and go figure out if the blocks are better. And that's ultimately what you got to do. And that's what I did. So hopefully I've helped you guys out, and I will see you guys next time.